Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Grandma Has ADHD. You're going to hear a voice today that is not a grandma, but a grandpa. And I'm excited to introduce you to Will Holditch, who is from Dallas, Texas, and grew up in Texas, where he did a lot of things before he earned his MBA and had a very successful sales career. But we connected through a podcast group where we share that we are looking for guests. And I really liked his response because he is the author of a book called Strategic Planning for the Golden Years, which is a comprehensive guide, an easy to use workbook designed for caregivers, and because of the experience that he had, which I'm going to let him share with you. He is one of the only guests that I did not have a conversation with before scheduling him. And of course, the first thing that I asked him before I brought him onto our stage was, do you have ADHD? And I love his response. So I'm going to let Will tell you a little bit about his background. We're going to talk about his book, but first we're going to start with your ADHD journey, because as I know for myself, I love to hear my story in other people. It just makes me feel that I wasn't alone, and what I was experiencing was, so Will, welcome to Grandma Has ADHD.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be here.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about first of all, is there anything in your bio that I missed that you think is really important to share?
Well, I did get my bachelor's of science degree came from Texas A&M. I have a degree in farm and ranch management, which sounds really funny, but it really is just a small business degree, an entrepreneurial style degree. And it's amazing how much that degree ended up playing a real role in my life.
I can't wait to hear about it. Did you know that they think that entrepreneurs could be up to 50% of us have ADHD?
Oh, yeah, sure. We're all shiny squirrels. Yeah, that's exactly what we are.
You know the language. Okay. So, all right. So let's go back to childhood where ADHD started to show up, and then we'll, of course, get to the book.
Okay. So I am the youngest of three. I have an older brother, an older sister, and my dad is a registered professional electrical engineer. So very in the box, very much, this is how things are. It's on, it's off, it's on, it's off. My mom was a school teacher. So when we moved to Austin, Texas in 1979, I enrolled in the local public school, and off to school I went. And I was a happy-go-lucky kid, and life was good, and I was enjoying myself. But I struggled a lot in school. And I noticed that kids that one day were struggling, the next day they went and got glasses, and they were fine. And I'm like, well, maybe I need glasses. And then I noticed, some kids would go away to a doctor and they would come back and they would be fine. Maybe I'm supposed to go see a doctor. I don't know. And all of this time, I was really struggling with trying to figure out where I fit in a world that I didn't quite completely understand. My older brother was an artist. My older sister was a dancer. I was neither of those. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a school teacher. I was neither of those. So it was like, who am I? What am I? And I remember when I got to fifth grade, I had a very horrible school teacher in fifth grade. It was the first time I ever got taken to the principal's office and spanked in public.
Oh, I remember those days. The paddles.
And Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it was a huge, oh my God, what's going on? And in that fall, we took a standardized test, one of the first standardized tests I'd ever taken. And I scored a 3 in reading and a 99 in math.
That's a
And it was
percentile.
determined,
Percentile,
yes,
correct? Okay.
percentile, yes. And
Yeah.
it was determined that I was functionally illiterate. But
Mm.
because I had created such great coping skills, I could basically fake my way through the day.
Mm.
And so that's what I did because I didn't know that's not what you were supposed to do. So from there, ended up at the middle school where my mom taught, and she helped me get into on grade level classes instead of the below grade level classes. And I entered the music program and really found that it fed my creativity, music and science and those math programs. I was really good at them, but
Mhm.
reading was painful.
So I have a question for you. Did you ever get diagnosed with dyslexia? Because I know that's very common with people with ADHD.
I never got diagnosed with dyslexia, but I definitely have dyslexia. I know this because, so between my wife and I, we have 8 children, and
Oh,
6
wow.
of them are somewhere on the ADHD spectrum, and 2 of them are dyslexic. And I'm like, oh, look, you're exactly like me. Okay, I get this now.
Yeah.
So,
And then I have one other question that I want to ask you. So you said you observed that people got glasses and then they got better. And you
yeah.
said they went to the doctor and then they got better. First of all, do you think that those were some of those, hyperactive little boys back in the day when they would put them on Ritalin and have them stay still?
They were handing out in my elementary school. They were handing out Ritalin like it was Tic Tacs, but my mom refused for me to take any kind of drugs.
So did they diagnose you at that when you went to the doctor initially when you said something is wrong with me? So no, you were not diagnosed.
Nobody, our family doctor had no clue. He's like, he's fine. His blood pressure's fine. His height is fine. His vision's fine. His hearing's fine. He's fine. He's just a wiggly little boy. Let him be.
Right. My mom took me to the doctor when I was young, and she said that she thought I was hyperkinetic because that was the word that they used back then.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor said, no, she just has a nervous mother. And then that was it. They couldn't sit me still to take any kind of standardized test to pass from kindergarten to first grade because I'd missed the cutoff. And yeah, so especially girls, we flew under the radar. But anyway, I know it's really hard when you interrupt someone with ADHD when they're telling a story, but I thought that was really important. I definitely want to get back to your family with ADHD and dyslexia, and I want to hear if you've got grandchildren with ADHD as well.
Gotten into music, science, and history and those things. I figured out that I was an auditory learner, so I couldn't read something and learn it. But if I sat there and listened to it, I knew it. So I ended up watching a lot of PBS, a lot of Nova, and I don't know, cooking shows and science shows, all these things on PBS, because that was back in those days. There was cable TV, but we really couldn't afford it. But it didn't have the Discovery Channel and the History Channel and the Science Channel and all those things. But PBS did. And I was smart enough. I have somewhere north of about 120 IQ. So I can kind of shuck and jive and fake my way through a lot of things, context clues, and, but
that seems to be, by the way, very, very common with those of us with ADHD is that we are bright. And so we are able to sort of mask what's going on. And so, okay, so you're right. That, again, I'm not surprised.
No, and intuitive, right? Like you can hand me a problem and I'll come up with a solution 10 times faster than almost anybody else will, because, okay, here's the constraints I have to work with here. And I don't have a problem making a decision like, boom, this is where I got to go. And I think that has a lot to do with my coping skills, where the fact is I don't have a lot of information. So I work with what I have and then I make a decision. I don't sit there and hem and haw over it, trying to figure out what I've missed. So it definitely came to my advantage. So as I moved through middle school and into high school, I really ran into a barrier in high school with my family, my parents. I wanted to take drafting courses and I wanted to try to take different artistic courses. And my dad wanted me to go to college and be an engineer, and engineers don't take those courses. Those are not serious classes. You have to have serious on your, And my mom was a school teacher, so she was just like, well, your dad says, so this is, and so I didn't take those classes, but what I was allowed to do was stay in the choir and stay in the theater group. And then I sort of wiggled my way into a photography group with the newspaper yearbook staff and learned how to develop film in a dark room. So one of the things that I noticed with my ADHD is while I have a lot of shiny squirrel moments, like there are days where I just can't focus for anything, but there are certain tasks I get on and I'm just like engrossed in the task. Like, so developing film in a dark room is just one of those tasks where it envelops me, and 5 hours go by and I don't even know it.
That is one of the biggest misconceptions about ADHD, is that because it's called attention deficit, people think that we aren't able to concentrate. And it's actually not that. We concentrate on what interests us, and then everything else falls away. And we are amazing. And, what I'm starting to learn is I can do a lot more than the average person if I'm interested in something in a very short time. And then I got to let my brain relax, because it served its purpose. But to your point, I've seen people that I actually met an author. He was like 90 years old. He was playing pickleball that weekend, hosting an event. He was like doing all of these things. He's like in his 90s, writes all these books. He's at a vendor event with me. And I looked at him and I said, "Do you have ADHD?" Because that's just my blunt, And he said, "No, I can sit still and write books." And I'm thinking, and he said, "My grandsons have ADHD." And I'm thinking, buddy, you totally have it. But anyway, I got to figure out how do a better job of I don't think that there's a stigma to it. So that's a big part of the why behind these conversations on Grandma Has ADHD is let's stop stigmatizing. I mean, look at what you have done, Will. Look at you have cobbled together. You didn't know you had dyslexia, but you were able to get yourself an MBA. I mean, you figured it out. So I think, and faked it really well. I think that does show so much about who we are. And rather than being made to feel ashamed or feeling, bad about ourselves, and I say strut that, wear it proudly. So anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. That's great. So I left high school and went to college. I went to college because that's what my dad told me to do. Yep. And I went to Texas A&M. I was in the Corps of Cadets. I decided the only thing I sort of rebelled against was I wasn't an engineering major like Dad wanted me to be. I just found the School of Agriculture. But my first semester at Texas A&M, I made a 1.4 GPA, massively failing. Because I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't have good study habits. I didn't understand what was going on. It was an environment that was so not made for me and people with dyslexia and people with ADHD and all of that. It was such a crazy environment. And so I went home for Christmas. And then because I was too stupid to know any better, I went back in the spring and sort of figured it out. And I did manage to graduate from college. I will tell you that I graduated with a 2.0001. So it wasn't with honors by any stretch of the imagination, but I probably have the most well-rounded college degree ever. I took every class I wanted, animal science classes and feeds and feeding. I learned to butcher meat and start with a live animal and end up with steaks on a grill. And I learned before Excel, we were doing Lotus 1, 2, 3 spreadsheets. And it was an amazing experience for me. And I learned a ton, but it was not a distinguishing time in my life. And then I did probably the stupidest thing I've probably ever done. When I graduated from college, I went to work for corporate America. And it was horrible. They wouldn't let me function the way I wanted to function. They wanted me to conform within their rules, and I just couldn't do it.
I think that's what so many of us do, become entrepreneurs, because we can't. We just are not capable. And we see problems, we want to fix them, and then we're not allowed to. So
right. Yeah. And I had a boss that was playing favorites, and that's my least favorite thing in the world, is to have somebody play favorites. And so it's definitely one of those things. So I left there and I ended up working for the family business.
Okay.
And my dad owned a party rental business. We rented tables, chairs, dance floor, glassware, flatware. We were doing less than $1 million in revenue. It was a small business. And he's like, "Hey, come back here and work for me." And I was like, "I don't want to do that." But I was like, "Okay, I'll give it a try." And my first big event to sell was Governor Bush's second inaugural barbecue for his closest 17,500 friends.
Wow.
And we did all the tables, chairs, tents, coordinated with the barbecue guys, coordinated with the band, coordinated with the t-shirt vendor guys. And when that event was over, I was hooked because it's fast moving. It's lots of decisions. The next week you move on. Nothing was in a box. There was nothing. So for the next 20 years, I worked about 80 hours a week for the family business, and we grew up from $1 million in revenue to $11 million. I had 125 employees. We did multi-million-dollar weddings, South by Southwest. We did F1 racing events. We did all these things, and it fed my ADHD like it was candy. Because every week was different. I'd go onto these job sites and there would be problems that I would have to solve. And I just shined through this whole activity. And then private equity came in and we sold the business. And the new corporate overlords that came in, I couldn't work with them. Because they wanted to shove me back in this box. And I'm like, no, guys, that's not how this works. I'll make you money. You get out of my way, I will make you money. And that's not what they wanted. They wanted me to justify everything and do paperwork for this and paperwork for that. I said, there is no reason for me to do any kind of paperwork on this. You just get out of my way and I will show you. And so that
intuition and flying by the seat of your pants and building it with the wings while you're in the air. And
no.
I love this podcast because I can so relate to so much of your story. And it's like we're speaking the same language. And I'm like, I'd be mortified too if I had to like sit and give numbers to somebody. That just wouldn't work.
Yeah. And no, it was horrible. And what was the worst part about it was I knew I was right and I knew they were wrong, but I couldn't figure out how to convince them they were wrong. And so jokingly like to tell people these private equity guys bought a bunch of baseball teams. They fired all the baseball players and hired basketball players because, a ball is a ball. So it's no big deal. And it wasn't working. So I left them and took a job with a company doing sales, selling dishes, glassware, and flatware in the special event industry. So to caterers, event planners, venues, those kinds of things. Loved it. It was a great job. Lots of travel, lots of getting ready, helping people solve problems. And my boss quit and they asked me if I wanted to be division president. And I was like, yeah, sure. But what does that mean? And because, the ADHD in me was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. But the other
tiny object.
Yeah, exactly. And so they had me move to Virginia. So I left Texas, moved to Virginia. First time in my life I'd lived anywhere else other than Texas. It was kind of fun, kind of scary, kind of wild. We'd been there about 6 months when the pandemic broke out.
And events totally stopped.
We went from $100 million company to a $20 million company overnight. They fired 250 of us. It was a massacre. It was horrible. And so I've set of twin girls. And so they're 2 years old. And I'm now a stay-at-home dad with two twin girls. We have no daycare. We have no school. I have a girl in high school who has ADHD and dyslexia. And how do I take care of her? Because now she's homeschooling. And because I'm crazy, at 47 years old, I joined the fire department in our local area. And they sent me to firefighting EMT school. And I went to firefighting EMT school at night. And during the day, I worked on fire engines. And loved it. It was great because you'd show up at the firehouse and the bell would ring and it'd be like, okay, let's go. It's on. And it was, an adrenaline rush and it was fun. You had no idea what you were getting ready to run into. And it was problems and it was this and it was that. It was great. I loved it. And we ran all during COVID. And my wife was an ICU nurse, so we would pick people up and I would take them into the emergency room. And it was an amazing time in my life. And then it ended. My wife's brother passed away from a massive aorta aneurysm. And we had to leave Virginia because we could no longer afford to stay there. So we moved back home to where my wife's family was in central Illinois. And we settled there. And I picked up a job working at a nuclear power plant doing rescue. and a job as a college professor there at Lincoln College in Lincoln, Illinois. So some days I would be at the nuclear power plant hanging out, and other days I'd be teaching class.
Nice. Well, that's also good for the ADHD brain that craves, fresh things and sparkleizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the nuclear power plant was interesting. It was slow. It would we'd do 8 hours or 12 hours of paperwork just to be able to do something. And I kind of get it. You don't want to blow that place up. So I kind of understood it. But at the same time, it was painfully slow. But then kind of a weird thing happened. My dad had a heart attack. It was a small heart attack. He was okay. But I picked up the phone and I asked my sister, I was like, hey, what do we know about Dad? She's like, what do you mean? I'm well, do we know, Dad's a Vietnam vet. Do we know if he has VA benefits? Is it pension? And she's like, I don't know. So I sat down that night and wrote 168 pages of questions of things I thought were important to know about Dad.
Wait, you did this in one night?
One night.
168
pages. Now, wait, when you say that, was that just 168 questions? And then you put you had 168 pages filled with questions.
Yes.
Hold on. Okay, I'm going to take a pause while you look for that. Ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently. And for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized. We'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com. We're back. You've got one bathroom. You're living on a sailboat. That's a whole other story, by the way.
I'll get to that in a second.
Okay, go on.
So I sat down and I wrote 168 pages out of questions I thought we should know about Dad. And then I went, well, Dad's never going to fill it out, or Dad's never going to talk to me about this, because my dad is a member of the silent generation and they don't talk about money or finances or any of that stuff. So I just kind of chunked it to the side.
I have to say something to you really quickly, because I just had an epiphany. I knew that the silent generation was the generation between the Depression era and the boomers, but I always thought that they were called the silent generation because we couldn't define them, because they were so, compared to those other very big generations, they didn't really, there was no personality. But you're so right. They are silent. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, because the kids of they were kids of the people of the Great Depression. And so many people in the Great Depression were so taken advantage of, they just learned not to talk about any of that. And so they just don't talk about that stuff. So I chunked it to the side and went, well, Dad's never going to do anything with it, so I'm not going to fight with my dad about it. And oh, by the way, he's not my problem. I took care of Mom and Dad for 20 years when I worked at the family business. He's no longer my problem. He's now my brother's problem. So I set it aside and went back to work. And we were living in Central Illinois, and the taxes were high, and the politics were horrible, and the schools were horrible. And my wife and I just said, you know what, we're done. So we sold everything we owned, 99.5% of everything we owned, sold the house. We bought a sailboat, and now we live on the sailboat with 2 of our kids. So we have 8 in total. 6 of them are off the payroll, and we have the 2 little ones, the 6-year-olds, that live with us.
Wow.
And
how do they like living on a sailboat?
Some days they like it a lot, and other days they don't like it at all.
Okay, so what is life living like? What is it like living on it? Like, where do you live? Are you anchored in one place?
So currently, right now, we're in St. Simon's Island, Georgia. We live in a marina, and kids go to school. They're on the island, and it's kind of like living in a tiny house. We live there's 4 of us, and we live in 250 square feet.
Wow. Okay.
So,
well, I wish I hosted a podcast on living in tiny spaces, but I don't. So, okay. Well, that's you are you were the poster child of ADHD. Will, I just had to tell you. So I had to get to, your book and how that came to be, because obviously there was a pause somewhere. So
on our way down here, when we were moving down here, 2 of our boys live in Georgia here. So one lives in the mountains. We stopped and visited him. And the other one lives in Augusta, Georgia. And we stopped and visited him. He has a brand new wife. And so we were talking, and she was, just that general kind of, hey, how's it going? What are you doing? And I mentioned, my dad had a heart attack, and this is, what was going on. And I kind of put this stuff together. And she whips out her phone, and she goes on to Amazon. She says, where can I buy this book? And I was like, well, what are you talking about? She says, my mom is 78 years old, and we are headed for her going into a nursing home or a dementia facility, and I need to know this information, and I don't know what I need to know. And I went, okay. And so the next day, I was talking with some other people, same reaction. And then the next day I talked to some different people, same reaction. I said, okay, so maybe I have something here. So I took my 168 pages of handwritten notes and typed them all up in the computer and put a forward and afterwards and did all this and worked with Woodbridge Publishing to get it published. And so it's a fill in the blank workbook where you sit down with your loved one, and it's like an interview. What's your name? Where do you live? What's your social security number? What's your driver's license number? And you go through all their personal information, their likes, dislikes, their medical history, and their financial information. And when you're done, you have a tool that if you have to be the advocate for your loved one, you have an idea of where the resources are. And so I kind of put it all together, and then I got stuck again. And I didn't know how I was going to get it out in the world because I didn't have the money to print 5,000 copies. And so I learned that Amazon will do what's called print on demand. And so I could put it on there, and they'll print 1 at a time, 2 at a time, however. So I'm like, okay, great. So now I can put my book out on print on demand and start working on getting the information out there. Because what I learned is most people don't even know that this is a problem until they're in it.
That's right. I say we keep our eyes closed, but just because your eyes are closed doesn't mean it isn't there. And my other favorite, so a little bit about me, Will, is I actually work in the senior industry. My business is in San Diego, and we predominantly are a senior move management company. So when a senior is moving out of the home, downsizing like you did from a big home to a small boat, we help make the decisions. We help deal with all of their stuff. And then we get them settled into their new home. Well, then, as typical ADHDer, we added home organizing, photo organizing, and I brought back my background of real estate because I was a realtor before I started the business. So I refer them to the realtor. And then when I started this podcast, Grandma Has ADHD, because I started to see clutter in a lot of our senior clients, and we were not having the conversation about ADHD and those clients. Then I decided, well, I need to become an ADHD coach. And I also became a certified senior advisor. And exactly what you're doing, we are starting to educate the adult children because they need to have an understanding. And we do need to start talking about aging and we don't talk about aging, but I was just reading about how Gen Xers are just turning 60, and we are going to be the seniors soon, which is scary, but here we are.
But before we get there, we're going to have to deal with the silent generation and the baby boomers ahead of us.
Yes.
And having done the firefighter EMT stuff and having done the interactions I've had. So this all kind of goes back to my wife's grandfather, who came to us with dementia and Alzheimer's. But grandma was dead, and she knew all the information. Well, by the time Grandpa got to us, he didn't really remember a lot. And so we knew he was a Korean War vet, but we didn't know where any of his paperwork was. And oh, by the way, the warehouse that had all the paperwork in the 1980s burned down. So the federal government didn't even have the paperwork.
Oh.
And then, you know, that was one experience. And then another experience was my mom passed away in 2017. And we were actively doing hospice with Mom when I looked at my sister and went, hey, do we have funeral plans for Mom? And she's like, no. So in the middle of hospice, we had to run out and find a funeral home because when Mom passed away, we had to have somebody come get her. And so it was these experiences that started building towards this book for me. And while I think it's an amazing book and I think it's an amazing tool, I'm finding out real quickly that most people aren't even thinking about it. They're worried about, did the car payment get made? Did I have enough money in the bank for food this week? Did my kids come home from school? Are they okay? Oh yeah, I called Mom this week and she's fine. But they don't think about that Mom's going to have a stroke or Mom's going to have a fall. And all of a sudden you're going to go from being the adult child to being the adult advocate for your parent. And so I am now on, I guess for the lack of a better term, this crusade to talk to my generation of Gen Xers and go, hey guys, it may not happen to you, but it's going to happen to your wife. Or it may not happen to you, but it's going to happen to your sister-in-law. Or it's going to happen, you're somehow in your orbit, this is going to happen. Or because you're not prepared, you're not going to be able to get Mom the care she needs. She's going to have to come live with you. And so I'm finding really quickly that what I need to be talking to people about is, hey, this is coming and you need to start preparing yourself for this. And it is quite funny with my ADHD in this aspect because I'm very laser focused on it at the moment, but I have to kind of remind myself every day, oh yeah, this is what I need to be working on today. This is what I have to do today. I need to, and as at this point we are at the moment, we're a very small book, independently printed, and we are actively looking for help to get the word out.
Sure. Well, my podcast will absolutely have a link in the show notes. And the book is called Strategic Planning for the Golden Years, correct?
Yep.
People can find, because I looked it up on Amazon. People can find it.
It is on Amazon.
And I'm so grateful that there is another voice out there who is talking about aging and seniors, because again, it's been so, even ADHD and seniors, we haven't been talking about it. So I'm happy to support your efforts. I mean, I know because of the work that I do, seeing those families when they come into crisis, it's so important. I want to bring it back to ADHD because the fact, first of all,
did we shiny squirrel?
No, I thought that was perfect. And but what's interesting when you have ADHD is you tend to, we have 2 times. Do you know this story, Will? 2 times.
No, I don't. Tell it.
Now and not now.
Oh.
Right? This is a pressing issue. So it's either now or not now. So the fact that you're even getting people to prepare, you know, for people with ADHD, like we don't like to prepare. We don't like to think about the future. We want to focus on the problem that we're in the moment that we're in it. So I think that's another coup for you. I want to quickly just ask you, do you have ADHD grandchildren? And what is that like for you and for them? Have you connected over that? Is that something you talk about?
So of the 8 children that we have, my wife and I were talking about it earlier today. We figure about 6 of them are somewhere on the ADHD scale. And my daughter, Catherine, definitely has dyslexia because that came out when she was trying to learn Spanish.
Okay.
So, and we do talk about, you know, coping skills and those kinds of things. And our 2 youngest daughters are 6.5. Okay. And so we are really working with them on coping skills and those kinds of things. But with the grandchildren, it's really interesting. So we have 5 grandchildren. The oldest is definitely ADHD. She is very intelligent and very much, it's, if I want to do it, I'm doing it. If I don't want to do it, a team of wild horses can't make me do it. And the youngest granddaughter is definitely ADHD because she's only 2, but you can see it. She is very much you're going to do it this way, in my way. And my way is the only way that it's going to get done.
It sounds like my 17-year-old. It's like, oh, you're not an adult yet. I know you think you are, but whoa. Yeah. And she's like that as a child too. And she also has ADHD.
Yeah. Yeah. The funny one is the third oldest son is not ADHD at all. He is by far one of the more, if he's not the most intelligent of the group, he's probably number 2. But he's like, well, I don't know what you're talking about, Mom. You get them a paint by numbers and you set them down on the table and give them some paint. They're good for hours. It's like, no.
If they're interested, if that's what they want to do that day, but okay. So looking back, do you think that either of your parents may have had ADHD, or do you see it in, because it is heritable and it doesn't.
It is heritable. And while I don't think either one of my parents did, I definitely see it in my grandfather, my dad's dad.
Okay.
Could be very myopically focused on stuff, and then anything else didn't matter. So that very much. And then I have an uncle who I've been told he and I are like carbon copy stamps of each other. And I believe he is the other ADHD member of the family. That would be in my dad's generation. Now, my brother and sister, I know my brother's oldest son has ADHD. He is a massively creative DJ. He puts together music playlists for people to buy. He's amazing. He's creative. It's amazing. And then my sister's oldest child, I think, is a little on the ADHD into the world. But for me, in my sibling level, I'm the only one that seems to be of the level that I'm at.
Sure.
But it's kind of I've learned that it's fun to be different. And it's not, I walk around people that are like, you're the same, you're no fun. I'm looking for different.
So this is what I'm noticing, is that people, when they discover that they, may have had ADHD their whole lives and it was never diagnosed, especially for, our parents' generations, there is both grief and relief. There's a grief of, what would my life have been like if I had known, right? And how would things have been different for me? And then there's this makes so much sense. Like, I wasn't stupid. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't defiant. My brain just works differently. So I always like to ask my guests, what is your best hack? How have you coped, cobbled it together? What would you say is your best hack? And then what would your advice be to somebody who is listening to this podcast?
So one of my best personal hacks is on YouTube. There's ADHD focus music.
Oh, okay.
So when I start working, so I do IT work right now as my day job. And so when I start doing IT work, I put on my ADHD focus music, and there's like a dozen different varieties. So I find the one that works the best for me, and I can just sit there and listen to it. And it's like pulses and thumps, and it's, while they call it music, I don't know that it qualifies as music, but man, it just lets me be able to focus so easy on stuff that normally I would struggle with immensely.
Well, see, I just learned something. I love this. I always learn when I host an guest. And what would you say to that person who's listening to this podcast and is, and that's why I love to hear people's stories, because I love when I can relate to someone else and hear their journey.
Yeah. So, the thing is, everybody's a little different. You've got to find where you feel good at, where you feel safe at. And for me, while my daughter, who's ADHD and dyslexia, is an amazing artist and digital graphics and all of that, and that's amazing, I find that I love numbers. And I feel the numbers give me comfort. So I can sit down and work an Excel spreadsheet and mess with data and all of that. Yeah, I know. See,
you're giving me hives. I know. But I can write a paper,
Right. But if you ask me to read a book, you physically cannot. Now, I'll listen to it on Audible. I just finished listening to a 16-hour book on Audible. No big deal. Didn't even faze me. You ask me to read that book and I'll never get it done. And I find that I love the learning, the knowledge. I could sit down and watch a science show and learn tons and just be a happy little clam. But if you put me down in the TV in front of like soccer or baseball or basketball, any of those things that all my friends in middle school and high school love to watch, I am bored out of my mind. It's just like, there's nothing here that I care about. No. And so for me, that was a big problem in middle school and high school. All my friends were into sports and they knew all these things about sports, and I didn't care. It was like, it doesn't mean anything to me. So you got to find where your groove is. If you bake, bake. If you do art, do art. If you do math, read, which is one of the funny things about me writing a book, because writing is painful. And all of that is a painful activity. But it was one of those things where I just felt, I don't know, I like to tell people my mom was a school teacher and she taught English and taught people to read. And I like to think that my mom was looking over my shoulder helping me write this book because she knew it was important. And so she helped me get through the pain of doing it.
I love that. I love that. I have to tell you, and I'm not lying. This is one of the longest interviews I've done. It is, as I said, one of the first times I've done an interview, like sight unseen. I liked the title of your book, and I didn't even know if you had ADHD when I invited you on. In fact, that was one of the questions that I asked you. And it ended up being such an amazing interview. I have enjoyed every minute of it, or every second of it. Will Holditch. We are going to have all of your information in our show notes. Do you have a website or anything that you want to share before we end the conversation?
Yeah, so our website is authorwilliamholditch.com, and I'll send you the link.
Okay. And it's Holditch. It's Holditch.
It's a hole in a ditch. Yeah.
Well, it's really not a hole in a ditch
because there would be an E in there.
Yeah, this is true, but it was one of those names that was misspelled coming through Ellis Island. So it's really funny. If you meet somebody with my last name, in about an hour, I can probably tell you how we're related. There's so few of us around. And then, the book is for sale on Amazon.com. Just type in strategic planning for the golden years. It is a workbook. So it's an 8.5 by 11. It's designed for you to sit down with your parent and start filling it out. And it's not something you're going to do in one day. It's just, you're really going to have to do it over several months. There are probably going to be some pushback from your parent. You might have to leave it there. You might have to say, hey, let's just start with page 1 and talk about it. But the thing that everybody's got to understand, at some point, you're going to be in charge of advocating for somebody else's life. And you've got to have that information so that you can be successful, that they can have the dignity that they deserve in the end of their life, and that they get everything they've earned, paid for, and deserve. Because like with my wife's grandfather, we didn't even know he had VA benefits. We missed out on years of VA benefits that would have helped. So it's, knowing that information is so important. And getting silent generation people and even older baby boomers to talk to you, you might have to leave the book with them and come back over several times. So just know this is a marathon, not a sprint, but you need to start now, because if mom has a stroke or mom starts having dementia, it's too late. You've missed so much information.
Well, I am so appreciative to you. Like I said, you touched on so many different things that I do in my work, and it was a pleasure. So thank you for listening to today's episode of Grandma Has ADHD. We are building a growing community. You can find us on Facebook at Grandma Has ADHD. And you can please subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends so that we grow, and buy Will's book, Strategic Planning for the Golden Years. Thanks so much for listening. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.